Morning, everybody. Today is Saturday, and it's just in the first week of October. And today's video is going to be sort of the second part or chapter one of my story after I did the introductory or welcome to video a little while ago. And some of the things I'm going to touch on are some early childhood memories, a bit of my background, and then some of my first memories of police officers or wanting to be a police officer, and some of the first traumatic experiences I had in my life, and then I'll also talk a little bit about what it was like getting on the job and that sort of thing. So growing up, I was a hyperactive, energetic little shit that grew up in the South End, St. Vital area of Winnipeg, not too far from St. Vital Park, and spent a ton of time roaming around what we'd call the monkey trails, or trails along the Seine and Red River on my BMX. And my dad was your stereotypical beer-bellied traditional French Canadian, dark rum and coke drinking kind of guy who loved hockey night in Canada, even more so than the French Roman Catholic faith that he was born into and baptized in. And my dad was a social worker, and he'd worked in probation, parole, and corrections his entire life. And the yin to that yang was my mom, who was of Scottish-Belgian descent, who in her 30s went on to be a feminist and a working mom. And I get a lot of my stubbornness and whatnot from the Scottish side of her. One of my first memories of police officers is when I was a young kid, and I remember it was right at the intersection of Pulbury and St. Vital Road, which my street came onto. And I remember seeing and hearing a car accident, and I hung around, and only a few minutes later the police showed up. And out of this black and white car came this giant of a man in a light blue shirt and dark pants, super crisp, clean shirt. I remember his hat was on, his forge cap, that is. You don't see a lot of that today. And I remember being just in awe and impressed of this rather tall gentleman that commanded respect. And he had his notebook out in his hand and was just asking people what they'd seen of the car accident. And that memory has stuck in my mind since then, because it made such an impression. I was young though, so I didn't have thoughts back then. It's probably around 6 or 8, and I didn't really have thoughts of becoming a cop, but I just remember being impressed by that visual. And so I grew up playing hockey, and where I was like kind of like Brad Marchand, but without the skill. I sure enjoyed having a long piece of wood with a curved blade in my hands so that I could equalize the playing field with the bigger, stronger, and faster hockey players that I played against in tier level hockey. And hockey was a great outlet for me, specifically when it became clear to me that my parents weren't getting along, that their marriage was going downhill. And I remember kind of like cowering in the basement, not in fear, but just in confusion and in being upset, not really being able to grasp what was going on. Looking back now, though, I knew that things in the marriage weren't good, and knowing my two parents as they are, you couldn't have had two polar opposites of people. And I don't know how they ever got married, because they're so goddamn different. But they made it work, and together they did a fantastic job of raising the both of us. I picked up great traits from the both of them. And then the next memory that I had of police officer was at a career day when I was in Dakota High School. And I remember, I think it was at the convention center, and it's one of those things that you had to go to, but it sure is, you didn't really want to. I didn't really want to, but it sure as hell beat being in class for the afternoon. And I remember seeing an RCMP officer in their full red surge uniform, and Sam Brown and polished boots, and it was just, immaculate, sort of with that classic Mountie image that we get as Canadians was. And I just also remember being impressed by how clean the uniform was, and that to me spoke of, I thought it was cool, but now looking back over 26 years, that was real professionalism and pride in their dress and deportment, and that really means something. But I thought that was fucking cool, not thinking much or having any clue what policing was like. At that time, I think it was either 16 or 17. I remember being quite aware of what things were like in the criminal justice side from my dad, from probations and corrections and whatnot. One of his last jobs in that field was that he was the superintendent of Headingley Jail during one of the riots, and I have a pretty good story about that, which I'll tell later on in another episode. So anyway, years go by, and met my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and we got married very young, and I worked a whole bunch of different shit jobs, just doing whatever it took to earn a paycheck. And I remember, that burning desire of wanting to be a cop really being cemented in those sort of young formative years, but before we got married, and then afterwards, as I was working different jobs, from working at Superstore to being a mover, and to working different security jobs, and just basically doing what it took to earn a living. But the security jobs really were, something that I thought lent a great deal of life experience, towards being a police officer, because it was jobs where I would be in a position of having to enforce rules and be in charge. And, that was not necessarily necessary, but crucial in terms of me learning what it's like enforcing rules. And I also, I did that for a few years. And then when I wanted to become a police officer, I just started applying all over the place. The RCMP, Brandon, Edmonton, Calgary, because my thinking was I want to get on the job, so I've got to do whatever it takes, and part of that is increasing my odds, and that means applying all over. I wasn't just going to apply to one place, because then I'm really limiting what my options are, or my chances of success. And I think that's something that's missing nowadays in today's generation. Not to sound old, but I am. It was just a work ethic that I'd learned from both my parents. And, I wanted to do whatever it took to get on. So eventually, I went through the background process with Winnipeg Police, which is a super long and thorough process. And back then, I remember on the day of writing the first step, the written exam, I remember that one of the officers told us that there were approximately 2,500 candidates for 48 positions. Fast forward 26 years, and now our HR department is having a hard time getting 150 applicants. Less and less people are wanting to do the job for a whole variety of reasons that we'll talk about later. And it was just much more competitive and sought after back then. And to me, that speaks to a lot of things, the character and types of people applying, and what society felt like towards police officers, and that weighs heavily now in terms of who wants to do the job. And of course, as we all know, nowadays it's a hell of a lot less. And then there were screening interviews and panel interviews, And I remember it being at least a 6 month process and a background investigation where there's nothing they don't find out about you. You know, your background, relationships, and all that kind of bullshit, and finances and everything. And at one point in my career, I actually did a short stint, a TA or temporary assignment, as we call them. And I had a really good look at being hands-on doing background investigations. And that's an eye-opener. I would imagine that would be even more so nowadays. See what the process is like and how it's changed. But eventually, one morning, when I came home from working a 12-hour night shift of security, as I was in the process of falling asleep, my wife came over and woke me up and said, "There's somebody from the police on the phone." And that phone call was one of the best fucking phone calls I ever got in my life, because it was a job offer. And I'd earned it, and I was absolutely tired, exhausted from a 12-hour night shift, but at the same time so pumped about getting that job offer. And a hard time falling asleep that morning, that's for sure. And then it felt like a real rush to get fitted for your uniform and your kit and to get everything ready sort of last minute for the academy, which was starting it was a few weeks after I got that phone call, or maybe just a couple of weeks. You know, one of the first things I remember is that, you know, we were getting paid for our training. And back then, members of my recruit class, number 128, if any of you watch this video, I want to say that we are making $625 bi-weekly, which was a raise for me. So I was thankful for it. And there were also other things, you know, you're signing the pension papers, you're learning about all the benefits that you're going to get. And $625, well, that was about another $300 a month for my income. So I was just fucking thrilled, and we're getting paid for it. And then I made it. I was on the job. So, you know, you're thinking about, you're not thinking long term, but you're thinking about just being in the moment. And my first day at the academy, I remember that my wife took a picture of me walking out the door with all my uniform shit on my shoulder, and getting in my 1980 green F100 piece of shit, and driving all the way to St. James from, not really the north end, but Old Kildonan. I lived on Burn Avenue near Salter. And I remember getting to the academy, and one thing from me in particular was I knew nobody else, not a goddamn soul. Any of the people that were there, I wasn't getting on at the same time as any of my buddies. Some of my buddies had been on the job for about 2 or 3 years, and different people that I'd met in Red River taking my criminology certificate, my post-secondary education, the only stuff that I ever got. But hey, look at me now. So you're just running around the training academy like mad, trying to get all your shit sorted and getting a locker and getting your stuff there and getting dressed for class. But this was like the first time in my life where I was actually interested in the material. I was interested in getting educated. I wanted to learn about this shit, whether it be use of force or practical skills like PVO, police vehicle operations, or firearms. I'd never shot at that point a pistol in my life, but of course I'd hunted all my life, so you know I was somewhat familiar with some of those practices and theories about safe firearm handling and all that. But this was, you know, a cop gun, a pistol, so that stuff's really fun. The marching and drill and bullshit stuff that I was just not good at. I didn't get the relevance of it when I would be out on the street trying to fucking chase bad guys. I didn't see how that mattered, but it was all part of being in a paramilitary organization. And one thing it did taught me is not to look like a slob. You know, when you're out in public in uniform, you know, not that you're out there to impress people, but you don't want to look like a pig. A clean uniform means a lot to people. It speaks to your professionalism. And when people of all different shapes and sizes and natures, criminal or otherwise, are sizing you up, if you're a slob, then you're likely lazy, and you're likely not paying attention to your surroundings and your environment. And that's something that some people can judge you on or use to capitalize in their favor in a dangerous encounter. So I remember all the instructors, what did I know? But all of them being really good and really knowledgeable about their subject matters. And I loved it the entire time. And probably aside from going to Red River, the only other time in my life where I put fucking effort into my studies, into getting good marks, being a nerd or being a bookworm or whatever, because I wanted to do well. I cared about doing well. I didn't want to just get the minimum or just pass. I wanted to get great marks because I wanted to graduate and I wanted to do well. And, I would later learn that reputations develop really early on the job, including in recruit class. Good or bad, that's where it starts. And it can have a profound effect, your reputation that is, on your career, in terms of going to good shifts or getting into specialty units or plainclothes assignments. One example or story I can think of is a what if guy. Of course, what if guy or girl. Every class has one. That person that just asks way too many goddamn questions when everybody just wants the class to be over or the subject to be over, but they keep going on and on and on. And our what if person was well known. This wasn't just something that my assessment of a person. Everybody else in class thought that, and they hated it. So I remember the day that certain persons were involved in taking the what if guy's desk and every single item on it, the criminal code, all your gear, your bag, your binders, your notes, and using a Costco-sized saran wrap roll to secure everything on their desk and carry the entire desk. And I certainly was not a part of this. I didn't help this happen, this process in any way, shape, or form. Right down the stairs to the hallway next to the instructor's room, where there may or may not have also been a sign that says recruit class number 128's candidate for most what if questions asked on a placard. It might have been like one of those flip top pieces of paper and a felt marker used to write the shit out. And allegedly one of the instructors might have even posed beside it, because back then you could have a fucking sense of humor and not offend any sensitive souls. Nowadays, I highly doubt you could get away with anything like that, because it's fun and it's a joke and people get offended, including mature adults or adults who are police officers. At any rate, I got through recruit class and I graduated with pretty good marks in the 80s, which I don't think I got even in my second year of grade 12, where I only stayed around as emotional support for some of the friends that I had made. But I did well, and I was pretty proud of that. And then the next phase that we moved on to was field training, which back then, if I remember correctly, was a couple of months in 2 different divisions. Typically one of them being Division 11 or Division 13, which are now referred to as Central Division and North Division. We don't use the numbers anymore. We went from the 6 district model to the 4, and boy was I excited. And we're going to pick up on my next episode where I left off this time, and we'll talk about field training then.